Hi everyone, we'll be waiting 2 to 3 minutes before starting the webinar to accommodate for the rest of the folks who are in the middle of connecting. Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us and thanks for being part of our community. My name is Valen Kolika and I will be your host for today. A few reminders before we start with the webinar. If you have issues viewing the stream at any time during the presentation and are using the web browser version of Teams, please refresh your browser. If you're using the desktop app of Teams, please exit and rejoin. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be shared publicly. We will post the recordings on our community at aka.ms/security-webinars, and all the links that I'll be referencing, they're already in your IM. Closed captions in several languages are available during the live broadcast. You can enable them by clicking on the CC button located at the lower right corner of your screen, right where you entered it. So feel free to ask questions at any time by typing them in the live Q&A window and click on the Ask Question button. Be aware that any questions you post will be publicly visible. However, if you prefer, you can post your question anonymously by checking the box right below where you entered it. Now, we often get many questions on these webinars, and we will do our best to respond to all of them in real time. In the event, if the answer was not provided, or if you may have additional questions post this event, please don't hesitate to raise them on our Azure Network Security forum at aka.ms/Azure Network Security Community. If you're listening to this after the fact as a recording, that's also a great place to ask a question. Now, we love to hear your feedback on how we can improve these webinars, and you can do so that at aka.ms/security-webinar feedback. I would like to invite you to join our public community by visiting aka.ms/security community. That's the best way to ensure you don't miss any future webinars or major announcements. On our community, you can speak directly to our engineering teams that create our security products. You'll be able to influence our product designs and get early access to changes by doing things like participating in private previews, which you can sign up at aka.ms/securityprp. You can request features, give feedback, review our product roadmaps, register for events, or join webinars like this. We believe that the best way to improve our products is by removing any barriers between you and the people that create them. So we hope you'll join us. In today's session, Ashish Kapila will guide us through getting started with Azure Firewall Manager. Ashish is a senior program manager with our Azure Network Security team. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to him. Ashish, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alan. Good day, everyone, and thank you for joining the webinar. Today, we are going to talk about Azure Firewall Manager. And before we start, I would like to ask you a couple of questions through poll everywhere. And Alan, can I request you to activate? OK, so they are activated. You should see those now. And the question which I have is just to understand how many firewalls do you kind of manage within Azure as of today? Is it 1, 2, 3, 4 to 6 and these numbers here? So it would be great to get your feedback.
Yeah, and the link to it has been already posted in the IM. That is pollev.com/security webinar.
I hope you guys can access the link. Yep. OK, there we go. So we are seeing some responses now. So majority looks like between 1, 2, 3 then. Yeah. Cool.
We'll move on to the next one.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
Oh, they're already answering the next one. That's perfect.
Yeah, so this is to understand how often do you kind of update the firewall rules, and I can see that some of us kind of update yearly as well. So this is great. Yeah, so this will help me understand the different type of customers we have, and then I'll kind of share how Firewall Manager can help you when it comes down to managing numbers of firewalls and number of firewall rules from an Azure firewall perspective, and how easy it is to update as well. So okay, cool.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay, I'll start sharing my screen now so we can go to the presentation.
Sounds good.
All right, thank you for the POLEV responses. So as I said, yeah, my name is Ashish Kapila. I'm the Senior Program Manager in the Network Security Engineering team in Microsoft. And today we are going to cover Azure Firewall Manager. And basically Azure Firewall Manager is one place to manage all your security policies, and it's the management service for Azure Firewall. So this is kind of the summary as to what Azure Firewall Manager can do today, and we will go through all these individual points in detail as well in the coming slides. So the first thing which Firewall Manager gives you when you are using Azure Firewall is it gives you the centralized firewall management, which means that you can see all your Azure firewalls within your tenant across subscriptions, across regions. You can see all that information in one dashboard. Plus, you see the policies, all the firewall policies which you have. And also, it gives you an option to have parent policies and child policies, or a global policy or a local policy, and that kind of helps you to enforce multiple policies to all your firewalls within your tenant. It works with the DevOps model, as it's cloud native, so you can use Terraform, REST, or PowerShell, whatever you would like to prefer, to automate the management of the policies and the firewalls. And as I said, it works across regions, subscriptions, and deployments within your tenant. Azure Firewall Manager, it supports two deployment architecture. One is Secure Virtual Hub and another one is Hub Virtual Network. Secure Virtual Hub is the deployment model when you're using Azure Virtual WAN Hub. So if you're planning to use Azure Virtual WAN to automate your routing and everything, so then you can use Azure Firewall in a Secure Virtual Hub, where you can manage your security and routing policies. So it's the same hub and spoke topology, where you have your VNets, hub VNets connected to the spoke network, where you have the Azure Firewall. And not only that, you can connect your branches, on-prem environments, and you can have site-to-site VPN. You get like a complete view of or complete set of Azure networking services in the Azure Virtual WAN. So we'll go that in detail later on as well. The second option is the Hub Virtual Network. So this is a normal virtual network which you have in Azure, where you create a Hub Virtual Network, but you convert it to a Firewall Manager managed Hub Virtual Network. And again, this can be used for the security and routing policies as well. With Firewall Manager, as you can configure your policies, that kind of gives you the central routing, where you don't have to manipulate the user-defined routes and stuff and things. And that is when you're doing the Azure Virtual WAN deployment. Azure Firewall Manager also integrates with third-party partners. You can use third-party partners like iBoss, Zscaler, and Checkpoint in conjunction with Azure Firewall, and we'll cover that as well. So these are the recent updates from an Azure Firewall Manager perspective. As I covered in my previous webinar on Azure Firewall, that you can configure Azure Firewall to do forced tunneling, which means that you can forward all the internet-bound traffic to an NVA in Azure or to an on-prem, depending on the requirement. So in Azure Firewall Manager, in the Hub Virtual Network deployment, now you can do forced tunneling as well. We have the security providers too, which are available or in the virtual hub. As you can see, Zscaler, Checkpoint, and iBoss, so you can use them. Multiple public IP support in secure virtual hub as well. From a firewall policy perspective, you can use IP groups, custom DNS, and DNS proxy. Again, I covered that in the previous webinar. And also in the firewall policy, you can manage or whitelist any kind of false positives which you may see from a threat intelligence perspective as well, because Azure Firewall uses threat intel, and if there are any whitelisting you have to do, you can do it in the central firewall policy using Firewall Manager. Right. So these are the two deployment architecture when it comes down to the Firewall Manager. First one, as I was saying, is the Hub Virtual Network, which is a normal virtual network which you can convert into a Hub Virtual Network, and you can manage it using the Azure Firewall Manager. The benefit of this is that you can have multiple Hub VNets, and you can use Azure Firewall Manager to push your policies and everything to all your firewalls. So you don't have to go and individually change the rules on each Azure firewall. With Firewall Manager, you can just centrally create the policies and you can push it to multiple Azure firewalls. The second option is the Secure Virtual Hub, which we will go in more detail as well. The vWAN firewalls. So with Virtual WAN, as you can see over here, you have Azure Firewall in the Secure vHub, and you have your branch offices connected to it on the vWAN. it also integrates with third party. So if you want to send all internet bound traffic to any of these third party uh, uh, providers, you can always use that as well. Okay, so what is virtual WAN? So as I was saying, virtual WAN is like a service in Azure, which kind of brings all your networking and routing functionalities into a single or a centralized view. It You can use all these Azure networking connectivity features like site to site, point to site, express route, and all that. The main thing here is that with virtual WAN, you have dynamic routing, so you don't have to create those UDRs and things. It kind of does the dynamic routing, it scales out. You have like the one interface to manage your network. You can have SDN connectivity as well with virtual WAN, as you can see over here, that with virtual WAN, you have your Azure VNets, you have your headquarters connected to your virtual vWAN using express route, you've got branches connected using SD-WAN, and you have your normal user connecting to virtual WAN using point to site VPN. So even the clients, like when they use their mobile application to access maybe some applications which are in Azure or anything, they can do a point to site and the traffic can go through the virtual WAN. But the main thing is that it does the dynamic routing and dynamic scaling based on the traffic. How does Azure Firewall fits in? As you can see with virtual WAN, you have a hub network, and in that hub, you have your Azure Firewall, right? So all your clients and everything or your branches or your Azure specific traffic, it's all getting routed through your hub virtual network. And based on the policies configured on your Azure Firewall in the hub, you allow the traffic to branch or from branch to internet or to Office 365 or to a third party like Zscaler or iBoss. Now, what kind of policies you can configure? So there are various policies which you can configure here, like Office 365 traffic, where you can see that Office 365 traffic can go directly from a branch to Office 365, or you can configure that the Office 365 traffic can go through Azure Firewall, but it can go through the third party service like iBoss. You can also configure policies around the Azure infrastructure like VNet and things, plus the PaaS services. So you have got that flexibility in 3 different policies, which you can see over here, that you can configure Office 365, IaaS, and PaaS services, plus you can configure the policies for your internet traffic. And as I said, Firewall Manager, when you use, it can push the policies across hubs and regions within your tenant. So if there is a requirement or an immediate requirement for a change, you do not have to go to individual firewalls to make the change. You make it in the Firewall Manager, and that pushes it to the firewalls. So yeah, and so if you have, like, for instance, multiple virtual WAN configured within your organization, then again, you can use the Firewall Manager. So this is just representing that how Firewall Manager is managing the Azure firewalls within 2 different virtual WANs. Same concept, like branch connecting to virtual WAN using site to site, clients connecting through point to site, and on-prem connecting through express route. So you have all those services, and all the traffic is managed through your Azure Firewall in the hub. So this is how when you take a decision that yes, we would like to use virtual WAN, and then you say like first thing is that yes, you create a virtual WAN connectivity. Once you have created the virtual WAN connectivity, you enable the security in the Firewall Manager, where you configure the 3 policies which I was explaining earlier. So for the first policy which you can configure is for your SaaS connectivity, and for this the destination will be Office 365, or you can have specific apps like Exchange, SharePoint, or Skype. And the option which you have is whether you say that local egress, that from branch to Office 365 will connect directly, or you can say hub to Office 365 or via a third party uh, uh, security as a service like iBoss and Zscaler. Second set of policies which you can configure here is the policies for PaaS connectivity. So any PaaS services like Azure SQL, storage, app services, or key vaults, you can configure that. Again, you have multiple options as to how you want that connectivity to work, whether you want direct connectivity, whether you want it through the hub, or you want to go through the Azure Firewall. The third policy which you can configure is for the internet traffic. And again, in this, you can either use Azure Firewall to direct traffic directly to internet, or you can configure to say that internet bound traffic should go through my third party service. And if you say that Azure Firewall you want to go with, then you create the security policies in the Azure Firewall Manager, and you then define what you want to allow. If you say no, that I don't want the traffic to go through Azure Firewall, then you can just set up to send the traffic over to a third party partner like Zscaler and iBoss or Checkpoint. So this is how the automated routing works, and this is a snip of when you have Azure Firewall Manager and Azure Firewall in a virtual WAN scenario. You can configure, as you can see over here in here, you can see that internet traffic, you can say it can go through Azure Firewall, or you can say it goes through a third party. You can say private traffic, you say send via Azure Firewall or send directly. So you have that flexibility to define how you want the traffic to route. And again, this is like you don't have to configure UDRs or anything, and this is all in the virtual WAN dynamic routing, which takes care of the traffic automation or the routing. And this is where you can see the option how you want to do it. Right, so this is the key piece when I was asking you about how often do you update the firewall, and there were like multiple options, and I can see that it was different from customers to customer. With Azure Firewall Manager, I was saying that you can have a global policy or you can have a local policy. The benefit of having two options, global and local, is that you can, for instance, that your company says, or the security policy says that you only allow access to certain websites to everyone within the organization, right? Or you say that the threat intel should always be set to deny on all my Azure firewalls in all the regions or all subscriptions. So you create a global policy, and that global policy can be managed through a global admin, right? You can configure RBAC on it, and you push that global policy to all your Azure firewalls, right? Then you have the concept of local policy. So imagine that you have these three firewalls, right? But on this firewall over here, you have you want to publish one of your internal or one of your management server onto internet. What you will do is you will create a local policy on this Azure firewall, and that you will create a DNAT rule to publish your internal resource, and that you can leave it to a local admin using RBAC. So local admin can manage the local policies or the local requirement. I'll show you some use cases as well as to how it all works. But as I said, the main point here is that the global policy is applied to all your Azure firewall, and local policies are only applied to the to that particular instance of the Azure firewall and not to everything. And this is key, that firewall policies can be typically shared across multiple firewalls, but the DNAT rules are firewall specific. So you cannot define DNAT rules in a global policy. That has to be configured in a local policy. And this scenario is also, or this feature of Azure Firewall Manager is also beneficial in the case if there is like an urgent requirement to make changes to all the firewalls, then you can just modify the global policy and push it. So just as an example, the Microsoft IT also uses the Azure Firewall and the Firewall Manager. Before Firewall Manager, when they had to make a change, they had to make a change on all the firewall. That used to take around 9 hours to be pushed through. But with Firewall Manager, as it is a central policy management, the same work could be achieved in like 15 minutes as well. So you can save a lot of time. It can be very, very quick. So that's the benefit here. Right. So how the global and local policies processing work, as I said in my previous webinar on Azure Firewall, that network rules are, DNAT rules are the very first which get processed. After that, network rules get processed, and then the application rules get processed. So same concept here, but with a global policy, you cannot use DNAT. So in the global policy, you will have network rules or application rules. So in that scenario, the network rule collection is from the global policy will be processed first before the network rules in the child policy or the local policy will be processed. So first, it's always the parent policy, then it's the local policy. So network rules collections from a parent policy are always prioritized. Same logic also applies to application rule collections as well. But if you have a network rule which matches the request, and if you have an application rule which matches the request, network rule will be the first which will be processed. And DNAT rules are always going to be in the local policy as they're specific to that firewall instance. Right, so this is the use case which I was talking about from an RBAC perspective. We have a TechNet article on it as well. I'll put that in here once we share the slides out with you guys. So imagine that you have an organization-based policy right here, and then you have sales applications or database applications or engineering application. What you can do is you can have configure the organization-based policy, which can only be managed through your security administrators and pushed to all the firewalls. And then you can create an RBAC role for sales and database and engineering, and you can let the sales team create those firewall policies for the local firewall or for their instance of firewall. So this helps you to make sure that all the firewalls have at least the base policy, and anything which a specific team needs, they create their own policies for their firewall instance. And global and only the organization-based policy can only be managed through a global admin role, or not a global, the security administrators, plus the sales one can be done only by that local team. So you can kind of do that as well. Right, so this is the use case where you are planning to use virtual WAN hub, and you're looking to use the third-party security as a service. As you can see over here, that all your traffic between VNets to VNet or VNet to branch, everything will go through your Azure Firewall. But when it will come down to anything going to internet, you can forward the traffic to your third-party solution. In this case, you can have Zscaler and Checkpoint and the iBoss. It simplifies the kind of connectivity because you do not have to create any user-defined routes which you do typically when you don't use virtual WAN. All that routing and everything is automatic or dynamic, and the traffic straight away kind of goes to your third-party solution. And these are some of the scenarios from a virtual WAN perspective with Azure Firewall. As you can see, these are like the traffic flow or the policies which you can define when it comes down to the Azure Firewall. So over here, again, the virtual WAN hub scenario here, and you can see like the branch to branch traffic can also be uh, go through the Azure Firewall, so you can kind of create your policies to manage the traffic. Also, like VNet to VNet can also go through the firewall, Azure Firewall, and you can have the traffic going from VNet to different branch as well. You can do that. You can even configure your policies related to the PaaS services, again, Key Vault and storage accounts or Azure SQL, all that you can do. And in this scenario, you can see that there are two different virtual WAN hub. And over here, you can see that you can send the Office 365 either from a branch directly to Office 365, or you can send it through a third party as well. And yeah, so from a traffic flow perspective, you have options from branch to VNet, branch to branch, VNet to VNet, Office 365 breakout or branch, and all these policies you can configure as I was showing you in that flow chart, the three policies. So yeah, so that's pretty much what I have. Valen?
Sure. It sounds good. So if you can just mute, looks like I can. There you go. I could hear myself an echo. Okay, so we do have, as usual, the ask speaker a question. But before we jump into that one, I would like to share another short survey that we have prepared for this call. So let me just present that really quickly. And it's the same link that we used as before, and I will post that here shortly. Okay, and we already got some responses.
Okay. Yeah, and this is where the RBAC model with parent and local policy can help you to define, where you say that yes, parent policy gets applied to, or the base policy get applied to all the Azure firewalls, and you have your local policy for based on your local admin for the regions. So we don't have one. I was expecting that either, but yeah. Okay. Right. Wow. So weekly we get firewall audited as well, just to see the process of what you use to create the rules and how the requests are, or rules are created, how the requests are processed. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Happy to go with the Q&A as well.
Perfect. Okay.
Ashish, while we're waiting for our other questions to come in, there's one in the chat that I think that you could elaborate on a little bit. There was a question that came in about rule processing, or rather policy processing order in a parent-child setup. And so the question was, which firewall policy will take precedence, the global one or the local one? Can you go into a little bit more about rule processing order?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, so when you talk about the rule processing, it's the global policy which will always be processed first. Okay, and once the global policy has been processed, if there are no rules matching, then we go to the child policy, and that's where we will match the rules. So global policy first, then child policy, and from a rule processing perspective, network rules in global policy first, then the application rules in the global policy first, then the network rules in the child policy, and then the application rules in the child policy, and DNet rules always get processed first, and that they can only be in the child policy. Okay, any other questions do we have? Or
not yet, but while we're looking at that one, there is a question on if there's additional price for Azure Firewall. Maybe you can answer that.
so I do not have that information, but we can put it in the slides afterwards, or I can answer it afterwards. Unless Anthony, you have any information on the pricing.
Yeah, I've just pasted the link for pricing in the chat, and yes, the Azure Firewall does come with a cost. The bulk of the cost is consumption fee. Just think of if you had a set of VMs running all month, you'll pay for that. And then there's a nominal data processing fee on top of it. The details are in the response in the chat.
Cool, thank you.
I just checked the Q&A and tried to submit a question myself. Looks like there's no response, but we can move forward with, because there's questions here in the IM and I can read that out to you. Ashish.
No, I can see those as well. So I'm taking the new
perfect
here, right?
Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so I see that the follow-up question on the rule processing is that where somebody's saying that means that you have to add an explicit block if you want to prevent a child to allow it. Definitely, if that is the case, in the sense if there are some specific things which you do not want even the local policy to have, then yes, you would need to create a deny rule in the global policy so that the child cannot or the child policy, like no one can create that in the child policy to allow it. Another one is, I would imagine global first. Yeah, that's the rule processing order.
Okay.
Can we send Azure Firewall logs to Azure Sentinel? Yes, you can do that. We have a data connector which you can utilize in the Azure Sentinel for Azure Firewall, and you can send the logs to Sentinel.
Perfect. I think I did move one from the new to published, the one where is being asked for the more centralized solution. For what other advantages and feature does Azure Firewall have that other third-party solutions do not?
So Azure Firewall, Azure Firewall Manager, all our network security products, they're all cloud native, right? So if you're looking to automate any of your resource or any of these network security products, you can always automate using Terraform or REST or whatever. Plus, they're all managed solutions. So you are not managing anything in terms of VMs or load balancers and all those things. You don't have to go and update firmwares. These are all managed as well. Also, with Azure Firewall, you can implement them in availability zones as well in Azure. So you get the 99.99% SLA as well.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And there's the questions you already answered on the rules. And then can we send the Azure Firewall logs to Azure Sentinel?
Yep,
I believe we do that. Yeah, you answered that one.
Yeah.
So there's one came in under the new. Okay, let me publish that one. This one goes, is this processing order correct? 1, global network. 2, global application. 3, local DNAT. And then 4th, local network. And the last one, local application.
Yep.
Perfect. And another one just came in. Is there a documentation on how to force tunnel ASA to Azure Firewall in VWAN Hub?
So you can't do it in the virtual WAN hub. You can do it in the VNet hub. So if you're using VNet hub, then you can configure that. So when you implement a firewall in the VNet hub, at that moment, when like you have, so the only time when you can configure a firewall to do force tunneling is when you're installing it for the first time. So that is the key. So when you're installing the firewall, you configure it in the force tunneling mode, and then you convert your VNet hub, VNet to a VNet hub to manage with Azure Firewall Manager.
Okay, perfect. And I think that concludes everything I'm sharing here with the folks, our security community webinars. We are wrapping up with the Azure Network next week. We have back-to-back. In fact, we have webinars Monday through Thursday. So if you have not registered yet, please do so by visiting us at aka.ms/security-webinars. And in case we missed to answer your questions, or if you have additional questions, you can visit us on our Azure Network Security forum at AKMS Azure Network Security Community. And let me just share those links once again with you guys. I would like to close this webinar by thanking Ashish for another awesome presentation. And I think you have another one next week, right, Ashish?
Yes, so we're going to be discussing the architecture or advanced reference architecture for Azure Network Security.
Perfect. Looking forward to that. And of course, thank you to the rest of the team who helped answering the questions. And most of all, I want to thank all of you for being part of our community and for joining us on these webinars. We hope to see you next time. And I appreciate your feedback on the polling side. Thank you. Goodbye.